I guess, making a case for why public opinion matters, right? Because he says if citizens don't know enough about these issues, then it doesn't matter if whether or not, sort of they influence policy making. And so then he goes on to explore how they are informed, sufficiently informed. So, how much information do they need? So, what are the alternatives to perfect information? How does he, because we can't all know everything about every issue, and we don't, and that's clear. But so, how do we suffice?
One of the examples that he gives is that people tend to specialize in things that they really care about, and that if enough people care about different issues, then it all balances out.
Right, so in the aggregate, you care about ponies and I care about clouds, and after a while, in the aggregate, all issues are covered in this sort of blanket, right? What else?
He also talks about cue taking, about how you sort of find a political figure that you sort of generally believe in. And whenever they start advocating, you just kind of say, oh yeah, they know what they're doing, I'm going to advocate that as well.
Right, if Bernie Sanders says do it, I'm doing it. I'm good with that, right? And that's that's the Schumpeter says, the basic idea is you vote for the person that reflects your views, and then you let him do his or her job, right? What else? Anything else? Cue taking, the issue publics, the aggregating preferences. Okay, so is that enough? I think we talked a few classes ago about how, do we really want to expand the vote to people who can't be bothered to vote? Right, so how do you feel about public opinion, and how much do we need to pay attention to people who aren't informed? Or is that not a problem?
Well, of course, it's important, especially for senators. I believe I mentioned that before. Like caring about re-electing, to be re-elected, trying to send or show for citizens in a good way, especially in taking decisions in major issues. So they care about sending the message to the public and giving them the right information, or showing them the right face of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it matters.
So that's okay.
Another alternative that we talked about was something you mentioned in the first class about how the textbook industry is really heavily influenced by one set of beliefs. And if you could have, I guess, a more equitable point that shows a variety of points that could provide a better education and hopefully more informed decisions.
Okay.
I think in part, I kind of take issue with that general sentiment that appears in some of the articles, which is most people are uninformed, most people don't care. Someone that we read, I don't know who right now, I'd have to dig through all this highlighted mess, says well actually if you kind of pose the questions to people in a way that's meaningful, you can kind of get at this mid-level of opinion about an issue, or kind of a reasonable amount of awareness that they can make an adequate policy decision. So I think that there's kind of an operational issue there with the discussion that our writers are having with each other.
Dele Carpini, who's over at Annenberg, has done a lot of studies on public opinion, and he's one of the ones that
said that.
It's wow, people are astoundingly ignorant on a wide variety of issues. But it is complicated.
Very. I mean, just I feel like we all have wrestled in here a lot with the ACA, and we put a lot of hours in, and we're still all kind of what? On some aspects of it, So there's just this kind of conflict, I think, is problematic for several reasons.
So what does he find in his study? He accepts that public opinion is important, and what does he find? are, sorry,
But I'd say his findings is pretty optimistic that, you know, even though no one has this perfect information, like, it ends up working out in the long run because different people have different specializations, different interests, and even when people have misinformation and make mistakes, those
yeah,
mistakes cancel out. Like one person might accidentally vote Republican, but another person will accidentally
Right.
vote Democrat. So-
right. So on question number 1, we're good.
I just have one question. Maybe because of lack of accountability in the US, like congressmen, they're not really accountable to their to general public. They are only accountable for their constituencies.
Okay.
This may be a problem because they don't really care about real information getting to everybody. They just care about parts of information getting to a specific part of their constituency.
Okay. That might, right, I mean, I guess the idea is that they are, but everyone is representing somebody. No one's left unrepresented, right? Somebody falls under somebody's umbrella, right? So, and they legitimately might have different viewpoints. Somebody in Mississippi might have very different wants and needs than someone in California. So there's a case to be made for that's very specific accountability. Okay, so then what does he find about poor, middle class, and rich interests versus policy outcomes? Did I not give you enough of that part of the reading?
Well, he said that like it's hard to find specific clear-cut examples of when elites or the wealthy or whoever you want to attribute as like the idea shapers have significantly influenced people with less information to do something like kind of against their interests.
Okay.
He also brought up a few points, specifically when he was talking about the Chamber of Commerce, where he was like, even though they spent several $1 million on specific campaigns, certain projects, they still didn't get passed. Even in one case where, we're together with the AFL-CIO, they still couldn't get anything passed. And so I think he was kind of saying, in some cases it's easy to say, oh yeah, money buys influence, but in a lot of cases, it doesn't always do so.
I think his findings reflect findings of a couple of other people in the political science literature who, what he says is, when rich, middle income, and poor people basically agree on something, that's fine. When, but if, say, the poor and the rich have very different views on something, it's probably gonna go the way of the rich people. Right, so, and it's not so neat as, it's not so neat as sort of the self-interest of the rich always wins. It doesn't always work that way, right? Because their policy goals are sometimes different from what their self-interest would predict. So I think in the end he says, American democracy doesn't necessarily benefit the rich, but it definitely listens to the rich. Okay? Let's take a break now. We'll come back at 35 past, and then we'll continue with lobbying and coalitions.